What if the slowest way for a man to die is by calling his own erasure love? It doesn't begin with violence. It begins with hesitation. The first time you felt dismissed but said nothing. The first eye roll you forgave. The first sarcastic remark she made about you in public that you laughed off even though it stung. You told yourself not to be sensitive. You told yourself real men don't make a scene. So you didn't. Then came the compromises. You started adjusting to her moods. You toned yourself down to avoid triggering her temper. You made yourself smaller so her chaos could feel bigger without resistance. You gave up your plans. You rearranged your priorities. You told yourself it was worth it because love is sacrifice, right? You lost sleep to fix what she broke. You lost focus trying to decode her silence. You started walking on eggshells in your own home, calling it peace. And still, you stayed. Because the fear of being alone felt heavier than the pain of disappearing. That's how most men fall, not with a scream, but with silence. But there's a moment. Always. A quiet, sobering moment, maybe in the mirror at 3 a.m., maybe in the way your own voice shakes when you finally speak, where you realize this isn't strength. This is self-betrayal. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man should be upright, not kept upright." And yet here you are, propped up by hope memory, and fear, not principle. This video isn't here to blame her. It's here to wake you up, to remind you that you were never meant to survive someone else's emotional storm by drowning in it. You were meant to lead yourself out of it. So before we go any further, ask yourself this: how much of yourself did you have to give away? Just to be tolerated, most men don't fall apart all at once. They aren't destroyed by some explosive betrayal or cinematic heartbreak. No, they wither in silence gradually, painfully beneath the surface of what looks like love but feels like erosion. It starts when love becomes negotiation, when warmth becomes performance, and when peace requires the death of truth. And the tragedy is, he doesn't even see it happening. He believes he's building something strong by enduring, when in fact he's quietly disassembling himself piece by piece. Modern masculinity is not being attacked with swords. It's being dissolved in bedrooms. In the way a man gives up his standards to keep the relationship. In the way he suppresses his instincts, dulls his mission, and rewires himself to tolerate moods, manipulation, and emotional coldness, all because he's been told that's what love demands of him. But what no one tells him is this: there's nothing loving about abandoning yourself for someone who punishes your presence. He used to speak with clarity. Now he speaks carefully. He used to walk with direction. Now he moves in circles orbiting a woman whose affection comes and goes like weather. And the more he compromises, the more he disappears. His confidence becomes apologetic. His boundaries become blurry. His dreams become distractions from the emotional landmines he navigates daily. This isn't romance, it's emotional disfigurement with a pretty name. Marcus Aurelius never said, "Tolerate disrespect for the sake of companionship." He said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And yet millions of men hand that power away to women who reward submission and resent strength. The truth is hard, but it's necessary. Most men aren't being left behind by women. They're abandoning themselves quietly while calling it love. And no one mourns them because no one sees the death of a man who chose to disappear silently. There is a moment, quiet and unspoken, when a man begins to tolerate what he once would have walked away from, not because he's weak, but because he thinks that's what love requires. He tells himself she's just going through something, that the sarcasm, the coldness, the withdrawal of affection are temporary. He labels emotional manipulation as mood swings. He excuses disrespect as stress. And he convinces himself that this is what commitment looks like. But what he doesn't realize is that he's not preserving the relationship, he's destroying himself slowly under the illusion of love. This is the emotional trap modern men fall into. They believe the highest form of strength is endurance taking the hit, swallowing the insult, being the rock no matter what storm she brings. But this isn't strength, it's self-erasure with a noble disguise. He bends, thinking he's being patient. He stays silent, thinking he's being mature. But every compromise that goes unspoken becomes permission for it to happen again. She tests his boundaries not always maliciously, but methodically. A sarcastic joke in public, a dismissive glance when he shares something meaningful, a sudden cold shoulder when things don't go her way. And he doesn't push back. He rationalizes. He tells himself it's not a big deal, but it is, because every tolerated disrespect is a message to himself that he's not worth protecting. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And what happens when a man's thoughts are filled with fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, fear of being alone? He changes. He becomes cautious, submissive, emotionally muted, not because he lacks strength, but because he's misused it. The tragedy isn't just what she does, it's what he allows. And until a man sees that tolerance without standards is not love, it's slow decay, he will continue sacrificing himself in the name of something that was never love to begin with. There are patterns of behavior no man should ever tolerate, not once, not for love, not even for loyalty. Because what begins as a small compromise quickly becomes a new standard. And the truth is, many men are not destroyed by one moment of betrayal. They are worn down by 10 patterns of tolerated disrespect that feel minor on the surface, but together create a slow spiritual death. The first is mockery, the eye rolls, the sarcastic remarks, the jokes made at his expense in front of others. It may seem harmless, but over time it tells a man you're not respected. Then comes emotional chaos, constant mood swings, walking on eggshells, never knowing which version of her he's coming home to. He calls it passion. It's actually instability. Then there's the addiction to male attention, women who constantly seek validation online, posting for strangers while claiming it's empowerment. But if her worth is built in the eyes of other men, she will never truly see him. Followed by sexual manipulation, using intimacy as currency, withholding love to punish, giving it only to control. That's not connection. That's domination in disguise. Next is contempt for his purpose. The woman who mocks his mission, belittles his discipline, interrupts his focus, and sees no value in his future unless it benefits her. Then comes competition, not partnership. She doesn't want to walk beside him, she wants to outshine him. He becomes her mirror, not her man. Add to that emotional manipulation masked as trauma entitlement, without accountability, boundary testing, and finally, the erosion of respect, not through rage, but through indifference. She stops admiring, stops listening. He becomes background noise in the life he's built for her. Each behavior, if ignored, becomes normalized. And when that happens, a man's identity erodes quietly as he calls tolerance maturity and surrender love. But these are not quirks, they are warnings. And a man who ignores them doesn't just lose a woman, he loses himself. A man doesn't lose himself in a single moment. He loses himself in a series of silent concessions, the ones he makes to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to preserve what he believes is love. But what he's actually preserving is an illusion, because every time he accepts a behavior that violates his core, a piece of him dies. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, invisibly, and permanently. That's how masculine identity erodes, not through failure, but through gradual self-abandonment. It begins when he stops standing up for himself, when he lets the sarcastic jokes pass, when he allows the mood swings, the shaming, the the manipulative silence, the emotional distance, all in the name of being strong. But strength without standards isn't strength. It's servitude dressed in stoic silence. She tests his lines and he moves them. She crosses his boundaries and he redraws them. She withdraws her warmth and he doubles his effort. Slowly, he stops being a man who commands respect and becomes one who pleads for approval in a house he built. His identity shifts from grounded to reactive. His energy no longer radiates presence, it absorbs tension. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when a man spends his days anticipating her anger, decoding her silence, or apologizing for his needs, his thoughts become wrapped in self-doubt. And that self-doubt becomes his identity. He forgets what it's like to speak without fear, to dream without being mocked, to move through the world without checking someone else's emotional weather first. And by the time he realizes it, he's not just hurt, he's hollow. The world sees a functioning man, but inside is a ghost one who stayed too long, gave too much, and lost the most sacred thing he ever had, his sense of self. The world teaches men that real strength is the ability to endure, to stay calm while being disrespected, to be patient while being manipulated, to forgive endlessly, explain tirelessly, and stay loyal to women who violate the very soul of the relationship. Society calls that being a good man. But what they don't say, what they never say, is that sometimes endurance is not strength. It's slow self-destruction. Too many men mistake tolerance for virtue. They believe that absorbing pain without protest is what makes them noble, that staying quiet in the face of mockery, chaos, and emotional manipulation somehow proves their worth. But it doesn't. It only teaches the other person how much disrespect they can get away with. And it teaches the man himself that his boundaries don't matter. The truth is hard to swallow. You are not strong because you stay. You are slowly dying because you refuse to leave. Marcus Aurelius never glorified passivity. He wrote of discipline, of clarity, of living in alignment with nature and reason. He warned that a man must rule his own mind or be ruled by forces that don't deserve him. Yet here we are with millions of men ruled not by their own values, but by the emotional volatility of women they fear losing. But if the price of love is the erosion of your masculinity, that is not love. That is spiritual suicide. And no matter how noble your intentions, if you allow yourself to be disrespected long enough, you will forget what self-respect feels like. So stop calling it loyalty when it's really fear. Stop calling it maturity when it's really silence. Stop calling it strength when it's clearly survival. You are not here to be anyone's emotional punching bag. You are here to live with honor, and no relationship is worth your soul. When a man finally sees the truth that he's been erasing himself for a love that never loved him back, the question becomes, what now? How does he rebuild after sacrificing his fire, his clarity, his voice? The answer is not in anger. It's not in revenge. It's not in jumping into another relationship. The answer lies in principle, in reclaiming his mind, in rebuilding not with emotion but with discipline. And that is where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy, it becomes survival. Marcus Aurelius didn't write about winning arguments. He wrote about winning within. He didn't teach men to react to chaos, he taught them to outlast it. Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over, he said. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it. This isn't a metaphor, it's a roadmap. When a man rebuilds himself with Stoic values, he learns that peace is not something he begs for from a woman's changing emotions. It's something he constructs with his own thoughts. He learns that respect is not earned by suffering, but by setting immovable boundaries. He learns that clarity, solitude, and restraint are not weaknesses. They are weapons of kingship. Most men try to rebuild by proving something to others. The Stoic man proves only to himself that he can return to his throne not to dominate others, but to govern himself without apology. In the silence that follows heartbreak, a man has two choices: collapse into bitterness or rise into discipline. The former is easy, the latter is sacred. Because when you no longer move based on emotion, but based on principle, you become unshakable, not because life is easier, but because you are finally built to withstand it. And that is when the rebuilding truly begins. There comes a point when a man stops explaining, not because he's given up, but because he's finally awakened. And when he does something, shifts not in volume, but in energy. His silence no longer means surrender. It means sovereignty. The world may call him cold, but the truth is, his silence has become a weapon, not to harm others, but to protect his soul. For too long, he was told to talk it out, to be patient, to keep showing up even when she disrespected him. And he did. He explained through her gaslighting, justified her withdrawal, rationalized her contempt. He called it maturity. But what he didn't realize is that he was handing over pieces of himself every time he spoke just to be understood by someone who had no intention of listening. Now he chooses stillness, not because he's afraid to speak, but because he no longer needs to. His clarity has become louder than any argument. His boundaries are no longer delivered through words, but through action. He walks away, not with rage, but with finality. And that more than anything terrifies those who once fed on his confusion. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And this man takes that to heart. He does not retaliate. He does not try to prove his point. He simply refuses to participate in dysfunction. He no longer plays the emotional chess game. He watches. He chooses. He acts deliberately without drama, without permission. And when she uses silence to manipulate, he mirrors it not out of spite, but out of principle. Because his silence is not emotional absence. It is focused presence. It is the discipline to protect what is sacred, his peace, his mind, his mission. This is not withdrawal. This is command. And when a man learns to speak less and mean more, the world learns to respect his presence even in silence. The rebuilding of a man doesn't happen in public. It doesn't happen with applause. It doesn't happen with validation from others. It begins in the quiet, in the brutal stillness that follows awakening. It begins when the noise fades, when the relationship ends, when the chaos he tolerated is finally gone. What's left behind isn't clarity at first. It's confusion, regret, emptiness. And yet that emptiness becomes the birthplace of everything real. In solitude, a man is forced to face the silence he spent years avoiding. There are no distractions, no affection to chase, no arguments to resolve. Just stillness and the undeniable truth that he became someone he never intended to be. That's the hardest part, not losing her, but realizing how far he drifted from himself, trying to keep her. But this is where strength returns. Marcus Aurelius wrote in solitude. He governed an empire, yet retreated inward to regain perspective. That is the Stoic way. The man who retreats does not do so to sulk. He does so to sharpen, to remember his voice, his principles, his purpose. Alone, he recalibrates his soul. He starts reading again, training again, thinking again. Not for anyone else, but to recover the man who stopped showing up for himself. The world will misunderstand this process. They'll say he's isolating. They'll say he's bitter. But they don't see the rebirth happening behind the curtain. They don't see the man who no longer needs chaos to feel alive. They don't see the man building a foundation that no woman, no loss, no betrayal can shake again. Because real transformation doesn't begin with love. It begins with loss, followed by silence, followed by discipline. A man who has rebuilt himself in solitude walks differently. He speaks less. he carries peace. And that peace comes from knowing he found wholeness without needing to be chosen. When a man finally stops chasing, finally stops explaining, finally stops bleeding for a love that drained him, the world doesn't congratulate him. It questions him. It calls him bitter, emotionally closed off, cold. But what they call bitterness is something else entirely. It's not rage. It's not hate. It's clarity. And clarity in a world addicted to emotional chaos always looks threatening. He is no longer reacting to drama, no longer trying to fix what was never his to repair. He no longer feels the need to prove he's good enough, worthy enough, lovable enough. That version of him, the one who overgave, over-apologized, overfunctioned, is gone. And the people who once benefited from his confusion are the first to label his healing journey as selfishness. Why? Because they can no longer control him. He's not colder, he's cleaner, more precise. He speaks less but with conviction. He laughs but not to please. He walks away not out of pride but out of principle. And this discomforts those who depended on the old version of him, the version who tolerated too much in the name of love. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And this man has learned to guard his thoughts with the same intensity others guard their homes. He no longer allows emotional manipulation to rent space in his mind. He no longer plays detective in his own relationship, analyzing her tone, tracking her patterns, wondering what went wrong. He's not broken, he's awake. And yes, the world may mock his stillness. They may call him jaded. But let them. Because what looks like withdrawal is actually resurrection. What looks like detachment is actually protection. The man who sees clearly is not bitter, he is free. And freedom, when you've lived in emotional captivity for too long, will always feel dangerous to those still trapped. The most important lesson any man can learn, and tragically often learns too late, is this: you do not prove love by tolerating what slowly destroys you. The world will tell you that patience is strength, that silence is virtue, that enduring emotional chaos is a mark of maturity. But real strength isn't how much pain you can absorb, it's how fiercely you guard your standards, your peace, and your identity in a world that constantly tries to blur them. The man who tolerates mockery, emotional manipulation, boundary violations, and disrespect in the name of love is not loyal. He is disappearing. And the longer he stays silent, the more he begins to believe that self-betrayal is normal, that love is supposed to hurt, that peace is earned by submission, that walking on eggshells is just how relationships work. But love should never require a man to shrink. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The practical truth in this is powerful. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can and must control what you allow to continue. That is where self-respect is born. That is where true masculinity lives, in the refusal to let your mind become the battlefield for someone else's dysfunction. The man who sets boundaries, who walks away when peace is threatened, who rebuilds himself through discipline and solitude, that man is not cruel. He is awake. And in a culture that tells men to seek validation through pleasing others, his refusal to bend becomes his rebellion and his redemption. So if you're a man searching for clarity, start here. Let your pain become your teacher, your solitude become your forge, and your standards become your shield. Because your soul was never meant to be the casualty of someone else's comfort.